Hello, hello, hello. So, my name is Erik Wolford. My nickname is Wolfie. I'm an LED cinematographer, and I'm going to be giving a talk now about the architecture of building an LED wall and the specifics of this particular LED wall. So, these are a few photos from my life. Here's me on set. Here's some music videos I've shot. And I also do a lot of documentaries. So I did Antarctica in December, which is quite fun. I started out in the 90s doing music videos with Spike Jonze and Michelle Gondry, carrying sandbags around for some of the best talented people. Great way to learn lighting and learn exciting new forms of filming. Moved my way up to the big tentpole features, doing lighting, and then did gaffing, and then now cinematography. So I've got a long history of lighting green screens and working on special effects, heavy features, commercials, and music videos. I've worked in Africa, I've done documentaries, I'm a specialist in beauty lighting, and all sorts of other things. And a fun one of me back in the day when I had a little bit less of a gut. I started out in Unreal Engine, being asked to be the guest cinematographer on a short film called Mr. Spam Gets a New Hat. And it was done by DNEG, and it was directed by William Joyce, Academy Award-winning director. They invited me in because they had 2D animators that were now working with 3D animation, and we animated the entire short in Unreal Engine. This caused some problems for the 2D animators who weren't used to having to use three-dimensional lighting and knowing exactly what angle to put a light at and how to adapt a game engine to high-end beauty lighting. So I came in and moved some lights around, changed the size of the lights to make them wrap better, added a lot of shadows, and I got hooked. And that was my introduction to Unreal Engine and doing cinematography using Unreal. So what we are doing now with Unreal is LED wall special effects, and we call it ICVFX. That stands for in-camera visual effects. Now, if you notice here on this side, here's the sound stage. We have the LED wall running an Unreal Engine, and then we put a real actress in front of the digital wall, and then I match the lighting that's happening in the video game engine in real life with the actress. And then we point a camera at the actress with the LED wall behind her, and we get a in-camera visual effect, right? So you get the finished product is what you see on the monitor here. It looks like she's in the sunlight, standing on a beach with a cliff in the background, right? And what we have is a video wall of the beach, and then some soundstage and soundstage lighting to make it look like she's outside during the daylight. So now in-camera visual effects are not necessarily a new thing. We've all seen Charlie Chaplin and his famous roller skating and almost falling into the pit behind him, right? And we all saw that as kids, and we're like, wow, that guy's crazy. Holy cow, he was so dangerous. It was actually an in-camera visual effect. And here on the right-hand side here, over here, you can see Charlie Chaplin, and you see the frame, and you see this. So you see where the camera is, and then we had a matte painting of a hole in the floor, and what was really there was nothing but flat floor. So if he had actually fallen, he would have just fallen on the ground. There was no depth of focus, right? That was all just a matte painting. So that's another example of in-camera visual effects. Okay? So we also use it not necessarily as the whole set, but we can use LED walls as set extensions, right? So this is a 7-camera TV show that I work on called Elevator Pitch. And what we do is we, Andrea in the house, my elevator pitch team is here, right as my elevator slide up. Welcome, welcome. So yeah, what we do is we created a LED wall, and we had buildings, and we had a sun that would travel across the sky, and we could choose different times of day. And that's another way we can use it, and we had a very tight set that we were working on, and we wanted it to look like a bigger penthouse. So we had another area with an LED wall that had a large atrium area, making it look like it was twice as big of a space than the physical space actually was. So that's another purpose we use LED walls for, okay? So now I know we're here at NAB, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritty details. So we're using, for our setup here today that you're looking at, we're using Unreal Engine running on a 5th Gen Z desktop workstation, okay? I know you're like, what does that look like on the inside? Looks like that. So yeah, it's Unreal, HP Z6 G5 workstation, Intel Sapphire, and 2 RTX A6000s running the graphic engine. So that's our gentlemen and ladies over here. Those are the people that have the, hold on a second, I'm still doing the slides. That was me just pointing to you over there. That's Non, who's, and Ghoul, my tech wizards. And they've been the ones who did all the artwork and helping set up the booth and wire it and make this magic run. So what we have is one engine running the Unreal Engine, doing all the 3D. We've all had our friends who have video games, right? And they play the first-person shooter, right? That's the same program that we use to run our LED wall. It's a first-person shooter video game engine called Unreal Engine. So one box does that, and then we have another box that we then feed that signal to. And now that box does more thinking and sends the signal to an ATM that we call that box the editor node, right? So then it goes to the node, and it goes to an ATM switcher, which is in this rack over here. Then we have a Brompton processor. The Brompton processor takes that video signal and turns it into hundreds of individual one-by-one panel signals, which is this wall behind us. It looks like a TV screen, but it's made up of a bazillion smaller screens, right? So, and that's the AOTA wall. We're using the AOTA panels. So that's the workflow of the stage itself, okay? And this is what the AOTA panels look like from the backside. If you were to walk around behind this wall, there are hundreds of these panels just clicked in and tied in together, okay? So the ATM also goes back to the record decks, the multi-view. We feed the signals back in. Cameras go into the ATM. We can add graphics. We can add a front plate if we're doing a sports show. You know, we can have the scores be superimposed on the speakers. And we also have the ATM feeding the Helios processor. That processor is running these special new lights that KinoFlow has lent us, these mimic lights. So if you notice, I have the video wall image up on a light over here, and it's showing a little video image. What that is when we work with these LED walls, they look great to the eye, they look great to camera, but they don't create light that's really great for skin reflections. So, and sometimes you need to feel like the set wraps around and it wants to be the same color space as the set. So the mimic light gives me a full CRI image. The reds look really red. It looks pretty on the skin. And without having LED walls surrounding me, I can simulate more LED walls giving me color space. It helps tie the actor into the magic of the scene. Okay, so and this is another example where we can use some lighting and use a lighting gag. You know, we're doing a little campfire beach scene. So we'll have a virtual light on the screen behind doing a virtual flicker of fire, campfire on the wall, and then I'll put a physical light on the physical actress, and I'll have the light doing a physical lighting gag, and it marries it all together. So we start to see that we have digital elements and we have physical elements, and now we have some amazing technology that ties it all together. So let's go ahead and bring up the Fathead scene. This is a movie a lot of us have worked on, and I was the second unit director on this, director of photography. Did a couple pickup shots and advised them when they were setting it up in the first place. So what we have here is an example of the Unreal Engine running, right? And now we have a camera here, a physical camera, and we have a virtual camera. If you'd be so kind as to truck the camera left and right, as you notice the physical camera moves left and right, the frame moves. You see the car parallaxing? It's a three-dimensional image, right? Just like a first-person shooter. So now how does the game engine know to move the camera at the same time the physical camera is moving? What we have is a tracking system, the red MOSIS box on top here. And it's an IR reader. And if you notice, go ahead and pan over there for a second. You notice that little star field? You see this little box there on the side of the camera with the little dots? Pan it back towards me. These little dots overhead, these IR stickers, the MOSIS shoots out an IR beam, and it reads what's called a star field. And it knows the relationship of the box in tilt and roll and height based on where that star pattern is. So anytime that tracker reads that movement, it translates that into a digital signal, and it marries the virtual camera of Unreal to the physical camera that we see here. So that's one of the main tricks. We also have a thing called gen lock, so that as the camera reads the wall, we print the wall, the camera reads the wall, the camera starts to refresh, the wall refreshes, so that we have a little tie-in with how the camera is tied to how the wall bursts the image. That way we don't get that rolling frame. You know, when you point your home camera at a video monitor and you catch the refresh and there's rolling bars, that stops it. That's the gen lock. So gen lock's an important part of this process. And then what we do is we then move on to some of the more esoteric and artistic forms of making this look like a real fun show, right? So what we have is we have a little physical motor on our cameras. We can open up the iris and we can close it down. And this is a zoom lens on here. Go ahead and zoom in and zoom out if you would. So as the camera zooms in and zooms out, we have a physical little thing on the gear translating that into a digital signal going again to the Unreal Engine. So the Unreal Engine zooms in and zooms out at the same time as the physical camera is zooming in and zooming out, right? And that gives us what we have is this thing called a frustum. You see the square image that's inside of the wall here? Go ahead and pan around a little bit. See that inner square? We call that a frustum. And that is an area where the camera sees. It's really computationally heavy to generate all the data for the entire wall. So in any way we can save computational power, we do. So one of the ways is by only generating data on the screen that we need to see. If the camera doesn't see it, we don't generate it, and that makes sure we keep a really good refresh rate and keep the scene looking very real, okay? So you'll hear terms like frustum, that's a frustum, and then, yeah, so now the next thing we do when we start really trying to make this look like a real set is we go into a lighting mode. And just like I would light a green screen on a big movie, right? Now we light an LED wall. And if I'm lighting a green screen for like a J.J. Abrams movie, you know, doing a special effects shot, they'll send me a picture of the special effect background. And I'll be like, oh, okay, they've got sun coming from the left. There's a big fireball that's going to happen on the right. And it's kind of like a reddish fireball, not an orange one. Okay, so now I'm on the green screen, and now I got to put a key light from the left, and I need to have a reddish effect light to simulate the fireball from behind them. And, you know, because cool people always walk away from explosions. So, yeah, and now I can just look at the LED video wall, and I have my style guide. So on this one, I would have soft overhead lighting. It's kind of almost a Nordic kind of day, and that Nordic light is kind of in that 6,500 Kelvin range. So I'll put a light overhead, and I'll push it into the same color space that looks right for the room, right? And then I get a little bounce going, and we would add in some effects light. So if it's nighttime, we would turn off all the lights, and we would do a fire barrel. I would put an orange light in here on the actress's face, and then I would add a Unreal Engine light for orange, and I would have an Unreal Engine light that would be putting the firelight onto the background over in the behind. So it's all about marrying digital lights and physical lights and virtual cameras and physical cameras. So, and that's sort of the magic of LED volumes, and that's sort of a quick hardware overview, you know. And now and again, circling back to our partners with KinoFlow with the Mimic, that's one of the great things about the Mimic light is if I have, you know, I have these beautiful aperture lights, which have really good CRI, and I can use them from my phone with the Sidus app, and I have a 600C that I can turn on and change color and do some minor effects with, and they're great. So I like using those, you know, but it takes me about 5 or 10 minutes to tune in a color. And then if I change the scene from daytime to nighttime, then I have to go and rechange all my lighting. But what I can do with the Mimic is now I can put the Unreal scene onto the Mimic light, and then the Mimic light just automatically updates as I change scenes and go into night mode. It will go into night mode. As I go into a different area, you know, and it's sunset, then it'll automatically start generating sunset light. So these mimic lights are half LED wall and half actual proper film set light. So they're a really nice tool to have in a volume space. A lot of times you'll see bigger volumes that have like a 280-degree curve, right? And they're very expensive, and you know, not all of our walls are gonna be able to have a full curve and carry the light from the side walls. So we can have a flat screen, we can buy a couple of mimic lights, and the mimic lights will give the same passive atmospheric light to the actor without having to build a whole LED wall over there. So that's another part of all of the magic. So that's kind of like a good overview of that. I think I'd like to open up for questions. If anybody has questions on LED tech, we have a microphone here.
Yeah, simple question. What's a resolution of the screen?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the sort of answer is more, what is the pixel pitch of the screen, which I can give you more on that. So the LED walls, if you go to Coachella and you see a big video wall, that's going to be a 3.9 pitch, okay? And that means there's 3.9 millimeters between each pixel, which is a pretty big gap, right? So, and then as you get smaller, you get tighter resolution, right? So then we go down to a 2.6 wall, which you have to be about 10 feet away before you get moire. And this is a 1.9 pitch wall. So I haven't done the math on how many panels we have and how many pixels that is, but a whole lot. Yeah, and a 1.9 pitch, which means it's very, very tightly packed together.
So it's actually closer to an 8K, I think, right?
Yeah, that's a good example of how about what it would be like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about an 8K monitor. Yeah.
When you create an image, you're saying Unreal?
Yes.
Is there like a specific Unreal or Unity? There's a two kind of engines you can work with that particularly work for Unreal?
Great question. So Unity does have a 3D graphics engine. Unity traditionally has just dominated the cell phone game area, right? Like they own cell phones. They did just buy Weta a year or two ago, and they're integrating some tools. But the reality is every video wall I have ever worked on has been done and run in Unreal Engine. They are very aggressive about training people in LED walls. When I was working on Mr. Spam Gets a New Hat, they had people assigned to us as we were breaking the lighting and pressing it beyond its normal limits for animation. The Epic Games has been extremely aggressive about teaching people how to use Unreal in LED wall work. They have both the fellowship class and the ICVFX class. So they are just really putting a lot of money into the LED wall scene, and their gear is being updated constantly to work with it, and it just seems to be most people are running Unreal. I do know there's one or two places that are running some Unity walls. I haven't worked on them. It does exist. They just seem a little not as much market share. Yeah. Great question.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. Wanted to ask about lens encoder and how you're doing that on this show.
Yeah, great question. So lens encoder means how are you getting the lens data to Unreal, right? I talked about MOSIS being the camera tracking, which is the box on top. On some cameras, like the Zeiss lenses have lens encoding data. What that means is when I zoom in and zoom out, or when I iris open and iris closed, that's lens data. So newer lenses have little teeny gears in there, and they have a little circuit, and they have a thing you plug into, and the lens data will just go straight down the pipeline. We're using some older Zeiss lenses that do not have lens data. So what we have is a little piece of gear. So MOSIS does the lens data for me, and they have a physical piece of gear that touches the iris on the other side. So when I move my iris, it moves the gear, and so it has an analog hack, which then turns that data into digital data, and then when it goes to my Unreal Engine and I iris open or I zoom in and zoom out, that's how Unreal knows to widen out and tighten up. Great question. Yeah.
Great. We have another question right here.
Hi, man. I got here late in the presentation, so maybe you covered this, and I apologize.
All good, all good.
But I'm curious, like usually the panels it's always 2D. It's a 2D shot from the most point, right? And
you know, there's a lot of ways to shoot an LED wall. One way is like if you're not seeing a lot of parallax and it's just a mountain range out in the back, you can use a still image, HDRI. You can use a still image, and that's a 2D image. Right now, what we're seeing is actually a video game, 3D rendered, live rendered game. Go ahead and truck left, truck right for me. So as we move, notice the car's parallax, the background parallax. It's actually a fully three-dimensional environment, just like a first-person shooter video game.
I've also seen the term 2.5D.
That's an excellent question. Okay, so that is depending on which person you're talking to.
Great question, David. Great
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
We
yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate you.
Yeah. So 2.5D is, have you ever seen an 1800s theatrical play? And they have the actors come out on stage, and then they've got a cutout, and it's the waves in front of the boat, right? And then there's the moon comes in, and then there's a line behind the actor where the moon comes in, right? So that would be something we would call 2.5D. It's 3 planes of items stacked, moving at different rates, which gives the perception of 3-dimensional depth, but it's made out of 2-dimensional cutouts. So that would be like using Unreal, and we would drop in 3 planes, like, oh, a rock up close, and then a house, and then a mountain range in the back. And as the camera moves around, we would just be going across those planes, moving at different speeds. It's a very computationally effective way to keep the render down. It's very quick to render your images. You don't have to build a whole 3D environment and build every nut and bolt in here. And if you want to see a demo of that, you can go to View on Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Awesome.
Alrighty, thank you, everybody.